We're going to listen to some rain sounds tonight. Today was Spravato treatment 3, and for background update, I've felt like trash since my last treatment, but not due to the treatment, rather due to the event that last Wednesday night emotionally shook me and threw me off my 2 days of feeling more calm and social. And I still don't really want to get into it very much because there's a chance all parties that were involved in just living their lives where I could see it are likely to watch this video, and they're all friends and I care about them very much. And that is the part that hurts so much. I will say that I have felt worthless and small since seeing all of these people spend time together for a variety of reasons, none of which I plan on getting into. Um, That was my trigger, and every day I have thought about it and felt it fully. At the end of my second treatment video, I made mention that I had processed and accepted the event and situation, and I will repeat myself in saying that you do not need to like something to accept it. That being said, I spent the past several days very bitter and sad, and angry at myself for something like this to have affected me so harshly and triggered me to have such low feelings about myself and my worth to others, especially those who I care about. And it is so easy to want to say cared about, but obviously I care, or this wouldn't be a thing. So there's just, it feels like there's damage there now where there wasn't before. Dan, who is in charge of my treatments, did not come and get me for treatment today. Another nurse did, who was very nice and asked me how I was feeling. And I told her not so great. She asked me why, and I told her if I talked about it, I would cry, and I needed my nasal passageways to be clear right now, which she found fair. But she did come back into the room for dose 2 and asked me again what happened. And I gave her a very vague description of this situation, and she showed some empathy, and we moved on to the third dose. And immediately after dose 1, I began to feel as though I was under the influence. Dose 2 did not knock me around as strongly as it did during treatment number 2, and only when the lights turned off, the lamp was on, and the door was closed post dose 3 did I start to feel the full effect. It wasn't as strong of a dissociation as the last treatment had been. It was more like the first, but it was still helpful in placing my thoughts and feelings kind of outside of myself to look on. I was in the room that they had me in for the first treatment, which looked very similar to the second room, and for whatever reason I thought to myself that I liked the second room better. So I need to note that coming into treatment number 2, I also knew that I would be facing down further processing of this event and consequential feelings that would have affected them, or that I would be affected during the treatment as I had been. One thing that's been consistent through all 3 treatments is that when I am feeling undesirable emotions, it makes it as though it is a battle just to be in the calmness of the esketamine and clear my head of everything. So I was prepared, but in a bad mood, and now I was in the room that I didn't like as much. I was also more aware of my body than I was in the first 2 treatments, which pinged a sense of disappointment that I was not as dissociative. In being more aware of my body, I felt very heavy. I could feel pain where I had pain, and I also felt the knot in my stomach where my anxiety likes to hang out very prominently to a higher degree than previously. One thing I did to sort of offset the knot in my stomach feeling was follow the lights on the ceiling. And as I was reclined and the colors would flow like down in some motions, I visualized them taking away my emotional pain. And I did some deeper breathing, and this would help me maybe for a second or two, but then immediately jar me back into my knot. I did some things differently than the past 2 treatments today. I told myself that the positive takeaway of today's treatment was primarily that I figured out what does not work. In treatment 1, I listened to music I liked, which also happened to be associated with someone I missed, and therefore my emotions caught up with me and I spiraled down. treatment 2, I listened to my newer playlist of music I've produced, and it really resonated with me. So in treatment 3, I went to another older playlist of music I've produced as Sim and listened through, which is about a little over a half hour, 40 minutes. During that time, I had a lot of mixed emotions. For starters, the BPM of most of those tracks were higher. There was a lot more aggressive bass and drums, and that didn't exactly sit well with me, but it was still relatively enjoyable. It also did what I feared would happen in treatment 2, listening to my own music, and it took me back to where I was when I composed those tracks. It pinged hard emotions I had at the time, and also for the times when I had like good emotions flowing and nice production nights, it faced me with a comparison of where I am now compared to then. And it one of the tracks also reminded me of one of the people that had upset me just last week. So I ended up listening to the newer playlist as I had during treatment 2, and it didn't have the same effect. The best way to describe it is it was used up, I guess. I was neutral with it, if not a little bored and annoyed. So at this point, being very frustrated, I experimented with what the hell I should do. So I ended up listening to some comedy audio, which in under 2 minutes made me feel gross and heavy, and I stopped it abruptly. Then I listened to ASMR the rest of the time, which was the best of all the audio I intook during the treatment, but didn't do anything for me either. It was just less emotionally taxing than the music had been. And here is where I struggled very much because during the first treatment, I had tried listening to traditionally relaxing music and I hated it. It irritated me. I was like feeling agitated, so this is why I had gone to a more enjoyable playlist that day and ended up pinging these sad emotions. I've found that while tinkering around that I don't seem to like music, period, when I'm taking Spravato. Everything either has an emotional aftertaste or just doesn't seem to do anything for me, and it's just a sensory noise. So, for a few minutes in between figuring out what to listen to today, I would sit for probably like 5 minutes in silence and look at the lights and found that my mind like raced less. Then I'd be reminded of the protocol, though vague, is that I should be listening to something, so I would put something back on. The last 15 minutes I listened to nothing and accepted that this is the end, and at this point I was indifferent about staying or going home. And I finally, after an hour and 45 minutes, was feeling a consistent calmness that stayed without too much fight from both my body and mind. So I was more sedated this time too than the previous two times, and I was told previously it was okay if I wanted to sleep during treatments, but during those last minutes, I didn't even want to close my eyes and risk it because the lights were so relaxing and I just wanted to enjoy them. During this treatment, I also opted for a blanket, which is more of a heavy sheet, but it was more comfortable. I get really cold after the medication peaks for the remainder of the treatment, and usually for the remainder of the night. I'm still wearing a sweater right now, and I am rarely found in a sweater. So Dan came in when it was over and had me stick out my arm to put the blood pressure cuff on, and it was still really hard to formulate everything I wanted to say, but I could clearly hear the monotone in my voice, which is very like a calmness too. And when he asked me how I was feeling, I said kind of meh. And I explained a little bit about last week, and though Dan was there for treatment too to hear how I had processed it, I let him know it was still lingering. And when he asked me what I had listened to, I told him a very short version of what I have said in this video. So he told me next time to try nature sounds or guided meditation, so I will. I also asked him if the medication still did what it was supposed to do, regardless of how crappy the whole experience was, and he said yes, and that made me feel a little bit better. A friend reminded me to be patient in a message while I was in the Uber home, and I appreciated that. I thought to myself, what, like, it feels a lot like praying in the way that I could close my eyes and just think to my body and the medication and the universe, just please work. And in both the cases of praying and hoping, there is a lot of waiting. You know, the nurse um, today, when she asked me earlier to tell her about what was bothering me, I told her I knew it was such an insignificant thing and I couldn't hold anyone accountable for their actions. I just really wanted it to affect me so much less than it has, and I really want it to go away. I want to move on, I want to let go, but it's tattooed in me right now and it is so hard. So, since Thursday is Thanksgiving, I'm going Wednesday for my fourth treatment instead. I will talk to you then. Good night.